Friends, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to episode number 5. Today's guest is a former anesthesiologist who spent 20 years in conventional medicine before making a very bold shift, leaving behind the symptom-focused approach to uncover the true root causes of disease. With nearly 30 years of experience in Western medical systems, she saw the gaps and the limitations and set out on a mission to redefine healing. Now she blends cutting-edge alternative approaches like applied quantum biology, holographic memory resolution for trauma, self-sabotage mindset coaching, breathwork, and medical intuition, creating a very powerful toolbox for deep, transformative healing. Most recently, she's been diving into a revolutionary health technology that's delivering results that she never thought possible in her decades of practice. She is here to share her insights, challenge conventional thinking, and help us all unlock a new level of well-being. Friends, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to Rachel Maurice.
The whole business of PCR, I thought, well, everyone says follow the experts. So I go back to looking at the source of who created this PCR test. And he says, it was Kerry Mullis, you cannot diagnose any type of pathogen disease. You can't say whether someone has it or not, but
Rachel Maurice, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast. Thank you so much for sharing time. I know that you're a very, very, very busy woman. Welcome. Thank you. And please introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
My pleasure.
I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored for people who are listening to this, because I know, and as time goes on, I realize that time is our most precious commodity. So I do appreciate anyone who's taking the time to listen to this. So my name is Rachel Maurice, as Mark explained, and I was practicing as an anesthesiologist in Canada for close to 20 years. And in 2021, I walked away from my career. So going back to how I actually became an anesthesiologist, if we're ready to go there.
Yes, please. Let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. So I grew up in a very, I would say, traditional middle-class household. My father was a physician, a psychiatrist, which is interesting in and of itself, growing up in that household. My mother went through several careers: nursing, law, real estate, sort of almost a perpetual student. And so academia was emphasized, revered. You learn and you absorb what is surrounding you, what's in your environment. So I just understood that I was going to be going off to school, post-secondary education. But throughout my schooling, I just leaned more towards the sciences. It just made sense to me. And that was because I was so conditioned, I would say, also to using my left brain. So things that were logical made sense to me. I was very organized. I would actually call myself a very type A personality. Even prior to going into my career, which you would probably want someone who's type A as your anesthesiologist.
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, throughout my upbringing, I would say I asked why. I asked why a lot. I didn't necessarily get answers to things, within my family. I know it frustrated my dad immensely that I would always ask why. And, a lot of times with parents, it's like, just because I said so. That's a common refrain, which didn't sit well with me. But as time went on, I actually had a year when I was in grade 10. I call it grade 10. I think Americans say 10th grade. I spent the year in Israel, actually away from my parents. And that was a really, really transformational year for me, because I was an extremely painfully shy kid, to the point where I didn't want to show up late at school because I was afraid of people staring at me when I'd walk in. And so that year, I actually didn't live with my parents. I lived on a kibbutz with 16 other American kids. And it brought me out of my shell. It taught me, and I started to learn about self-confidence and really believing and trusting in myself and my own decisions about the way I thought about things, which I think plays a part in what's happened sort of as my life has progressed. But then I finished high school, just again, assumed I was going off to university. I went to McGill in Montreal in Canada and had a really fun time. And then I was actually wanting to take some time off before applying to medical school. And the reason I was thinking about medicine was because I loved working with people. I really, what's the word I'm looking for? Value relationships and deep connections and authentic, genuine connections. And I had an aptitude for sciences. And so for me, that was, one of the ways I could blend that, because I knew I didn't want to do bench science. I did that in my undergraduate degree, and I just didn't have the patience for it. And I was encouraged by my father to just apply to medical school right off the bat because it was difficult to get in. And I ended up getting in. So I went straight into medicine. So I went straight through with my post-secondary, then medicine, and then my residency, which was 5 years long. So a total of 13 years straight after high school. And I did have some foresight during that time period, knowing that I wasn't married, didn't have kids throughout all of that. And seeing adults around me really being weighed down by responsibilities, I took advantage of not having those responsibilities. And I used money that I was able to borrow, because the centralized banking system will throw money at medical students and residents, knowing they're going to come out and they'll be shackled to be paying back that money, to travel. So I did a lot of traveling, which really, again, opened up my eyes to different ways of thinking and life and living. So throughout my training, my residency was, you don't hear this very often, but I actually really enjoyed my residency training program. And I say you don't hear that very often because
no, you don't.
because when I work after finishing, when I would work with surgeons and the nurses in the operating room and other physicians, and I would talk about my residency, people would bring that up. And I think it was the location, but the people that I worked with. And I also had this, I would say, I understand now, this addiction to that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand at the time that it really, there is a thing. It's a real thing that you can do that. And what happens, especially in anesthesia and really an acute care medicine, is there is that roller coaster feeling. Like what happens in the operating room, we often will liken it to being a pilot or in a plane. At least for anesthesia, there's a lot to do at takeoff and landing, and you would like no turbulence in between. You want smooth sailing. That's a good thing to happen. But oftentimes, especially in your residency, there's a lot of turbulence when you're in the teaching institutions. And luckily, when you're a resident, you have your staff there. But even afterwards, you have a lot of support. But that really, when things go south in the operating room quickly, it happens. Seconds are a matter, of life or death kind of thing. And so that experience really, as much as it's not pleasant, there was a little bit of, like a roller coaster. People who like roller coaster rides, my daughter and I could go over and over and over again, the same ride. But what I saw throughout my medical school training and my residency was a lot of disease, a lot of illness, a lot of complications that took place through the traditional, conventional medical system. And I would speak about this with people that were close to me. And for example, my father, but he kept saying to me that I just had a skewed view of what took place in the population, because the complications and everything that went bad would come to the hospital. Or those are the people that I would come across. And while there is a degree of that, I'm actually quite grateful for that, because what it opened my eyes to was that I really had to look after and take responsibility for my own health, because I did not want to have to experience anything in the allopathic medical hospital system if I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And it's not that anybody within these systems or the whole kind of medical complex is necessarily intentionally doing anything wrong. I would say most people, at least most people that I knew and have worked with, do have the best intentions. It's just the way the system is set up, the way it has been built, and the premise and the paradigm of this model and the way of thinking and the interventions are just such that it's fraught with potential complications and mishaps. And
Wow.
I think that's one of the things that is, it's downplayed by a lot of healthcare workers, and a lot of the population therefore just believes that it's not going to happen to me, right? The complications that we hear about. And again, when I was going through, I really still had this belief, and there was a real enculturation, I would say, from, the generations that came before, the staff, the residents that were above us, or the staff that had been in practice for a long time, to not only dismiss, but really ridicule alternative types of therapies. And if I'm being completely honest, we did not learn anything about how medicine was practiced prior to the 1900s, prior to Rockefeller taking over the entire medical education system.
Wow.
We're not taught that.
So you're not even given access to that. You're not even said, oh, there's some stuff over there. You can read it in your own time, but this is what we're focusing on.
No.
Wow.
So this is all, I might jump around a bit, but this was
Please do.
All my learning. And I have to say, after 2020, after the COVID, whatever we want to call it.
Yep.
So I fully believed it, because really you are programmed by your environment and what you hear and what you experience and who you're surrounded by. And so that really, it was my life 24/7, because that is the way we are trained. You are trained to be fully immersed in this environment, and that's how you get the experience, right? And I'm grateful. I see now, I'm grateful for everything that I've experienced, because at the beginning, I would say in 2020, I kind of felt like everything I had learned was a complete lie and a waste of time. Thinking about the 30 years that I'd spent, nothing is ever a waste of time, I've now come to realize. And it's allowed me, a really deep understanding and living in that model in my brain, to now where I am, which we'll get to be able to connect with people and explain. And for them, for example, medical doctors who are still of that mind, to be able to explain and have their trust, because I was there to then bring them along and show them a new way and be able to explain it in language that they also understand. So kind of, I guess, fast forwarding to 2017 was really the door opening to me looking outside of the traditional model. Right. Because my mom was diagnosed with cancer at that point.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, thank you. She's still alive and she's doing really well. So she had uterine cancer, but the not the common kind. So she was distressed about it. She was okay to have surgery, but she was not comfortable with doing chemotherapy and radiation therapy, which I understand. And honestly, I think it was because of all the stories that I would come home and tell her about.
Yeah.
And so even then, being fully immersed in my traditional sort of thinking and that narrow in the box thinking, I still knew that chemotherapy and radiation didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, because you're just destroying everything. There's no discrimination between healthy and unhealthy. And then you have to rebuild your healthy body. And so anyways, intuitively didn't make sense to me. So that the door opened through nutrition.
Okay.
Again, something that we're not taught in the traditional medical school education system to this day. Still, at least I can speak to the Canadian.
Yeah. Because I think in the UK, sorry to stop you there. I think in the UK they get 2 days of basic nutrition, but that's it, nothing more.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you just saw those balloons then. I don't know what the hell that was about.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I definitely don't need to do any hand gestures. I need to turn that off. I don't know why it does it. It does it sometimes. I'm like, oh God, not even my editors are going to be able to get rid of that. That's fine. We can have balloons. It's all good. But yeah, two days worth of nutritional training is what the GPs and doctors get here. That's it.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It really is, because common sense, one would think, would allow us to understand that our body is made of what we put inside of it, which for most people understand is food. There's a lot more to it now that I know, but food is a big part of it. It's going to make up the cells, the components of the cells, which make up our tissues, our organs, and our organ systems. And so, on the flip side, or looking at the other side of the same coin, you look at the food that's given to patients in the hospital. So now you have people who are in the hospital who are unhealthy, who have issues. So they're already on the decline from how their body's supposed to work. So they need even more healing, more of a healing environment, and they're given garbage food. Like I don't know what it's like there, but it's not even. It's like a TV dinner. If I don't know if you remember those TV dinners.
I do. I remember TV dinners. I wouldn't feed it to a dog. That's how bad the food is here.
Right. And then you have, again, those what do you call them, vending machines, right? With all the chips and the Coke, and then what is fed to staff, and staff parties. All the staff love to bring in, potluck. If it's someone who's retiring or someone who's having a baby, or there's a birthday, there's always food in the nursing station, and it's donuts, cake, cookies, all that kind of stuff. And so the staff are not healthy. And just a story that is really seared into my brain, because one day I was working with one of the vascular surgeons who, a good amount of surgeries that are his bread and butter are literally pulling out plaque or clots or the buildup inside of the arteries and the veins. And we had just finished a case together where he pulled out a really big chunk of plaque from someone's carotid artery in their neck. And I was going back to see the next patient, and he was walking back to the room, and it was lunchtime, and he had a bag of Doritos and a bottle of Diet Coke in his hands. And I looked at him, and I used to be made fun of because I was trying to eat healthy. I was eating salads. People would make fun of me, calling me a rabbit. Everyone in the staff room, because they were eating greasy burgers from the grill and so on. Not that burgers are bad, but the way that they were made there. Yeah. So it was mind blowing to me that this is really is commonplace, that is how healthcare, or our what we call healthcare workers, eat and feed themselves.
Did he see the irony of that? Of like, you've just taken out plaque from someone's artery, and yet here you are with a packet of Doritos and a bottle of, again, the irony of that, the bottle of Diet Coke, because that makes it all the better. Like, do they not see that at all?
I actually said to him, I can't believe you're eating Doritos and Diet Coke. And he just put his hand up. He said, "Oh, don't talk to me. I get enough of this for my wife at home." That's what he said. And he just kept walking. Wow. But we are really not taught to believe that food has any impact. I mean, I hear it still to this day, again, from other people about if someone, for example, has cancer and they're losing weight, they will tell people, just eat anything because a calorie is a calorie. That is what is told by physicians.
Wow.
Right? Not that sugar has any impact on, the growth of cancer, or it's quite, again, it's remarkable. And again, I was there. I know I know where their thinking is, and I know why they are there now. I didn't at the time, but I understand now. Life is busy. Everyone's really busy. And I'm not discounting anyone else's, busyness in their life. But when you're in medicine, you have no time for sleep. You have an inordinate amount of weight and stress on your shoulders working, for example, in the hospital. That's what I can speak to. And even in the offices, for the Canadian physicians out there, they have to pump through something like 60 patients a day to be able just to survive financially. A lot of people think doctors make a ton of money. It's variable. It depends on the country. It's variable on the specialty. And it depends how you work and how much time you take with your patients. But we're so busy, we're sleep deprived, right? This ties into what I've learned as well, right? Our circadian rhythms are completely mismatched. We don't get the proper sleep, we don't get the repair. We might sleep during the day, and then we're up under artificial light in the hospital inside. We don't necessarily get any signals from outside if we're just going from our house to our car to the hospital, and then that's in the dark before sunrise, and then we do the same back home after sunset.
Yeah. Plus all the EMF as well.
Exactly. Exactly. And then when we're sleep deprived, we really don't make great decisions. So
nobody would.
Exactly. So the food choices, that's where the food choices come in. And we're not thinking clearly. On top of that, because we're sleep deprived, then we've got a lot of caffeine on board, because I don't know any doctor and nurse or healthcare worker that does not ingest coffee. I actually hated coffee. I've never liked coffee, but I started to force myself to drink those desserty coffee drinks, because I wanted the caffeine. I needed the caffeine to make sure I was alert, because I didn't want to be having my eyes closed while I'm in the operating room looking after someone, right? So then that reduces your brain capacity, your cognitive function, the caffeine. And then you don't have time to even contemplate or think about anything outside of what you're taught, or outside of your specialty, or outside of, most people have a family to look after. So then you've got kids that you're running around after, then you've got to organize the family. And a lot of, women, I would say, tend to take on a lot more when it comes to the family. And then everyone's burnt out, and you cannot think clearly or make sound decisions when you are burnt out. And so it really took me, I know I kind of digressed and I went off and I was talking about nutrition and my mom and cancer, but that was really the door opening for me to looking outside. And I actually at the time became vegan with her, thinking that the research I had come across from physicians, and I say thinking because I am now 5 years after being vegan, have gone back to eating meat and understanding that that veganism is, for the most part, generally speaking, not an adequate diet for people. The human species.
Agreed.
So we did that. Again, I was looking at research, which I understand more fully now, that there's so much manipulation and corruption that even all the studies that we used to treat and implement strategies to help people are inherently flawed. But yeah, we were vegan. I did that because I was helping my mom. So it was easier if I did it as well. And I actually initially felt better, but I think it was because I cut out a lot of the processed garbage that I had been eating. And then in 2018, I actually went through a divorce that spanned about 10 years. I kind of, I don't want to say overlooked, but I kind of sidestepped that one a little bit. That took a huge toll on my health, but it really took a nosedive in 2018. And what I mean by that is I was so stressed. I lost a bunch of weight. I couldn't eat properly. I was eating, I don't know if you have over in the UK, the Dairy Queen but these
I know what it is. Yeah.
That's the only thing that I could actually stomach. I tell my kids that nowadays, and they kind of laugh at me because I'm always harping on them about, not eating junk food. But I actually had reflux, and I had classic symptoms of reflux, didn't realize it. And then I developed an esophageal ulcer, and I know it was all from stress. And then the reflux, the acid from the reflux got into the ulcer, and I had esophageal spasm, which was so painful. I thought I was having a heart attack.
Wow.
And that is what led me to, I think I was watching a bunch of documentaries because I'm always, like I had said earlier, I knew I had to take my health into my own hands and I had to be responsible. I wanted to make sure that I was healthy. For most of my life, I understood that to be exercise and nutrition. And when you're younger, you think you can exercise your way out of bad nutrition, which you can't.
I don't think it's just when you're younger. I think that's most people think they can out exercise their bad diet.
So I was watching a bunch of documentaries, and I had seen, I think it was Joe Dispenza. I think I had seen him for like the 6th time, and he just said something in one of those documentaries that made me want to go investigate him further. And I completely dove into everything about him, listened to everything I could, read all his books. And within 3 months, I was at one of his week-long events because it impacted me that significantly, because he spoke the language I understood.
Yep.
Right. And so he took me from not being a believer in all of these alternative things that I'd heard about, that I'd been, again, conditioned and ingrained to believe were quackery, right? And didn't have any impact, which is ironic. I'm going to say, just as a side note, completely ironic, because in the practice of traditional medicine, we use a lot of monitoring equipment. Let's say, for example, most people have heard of an ECG.
Yep.
It monitors the electrical current of the heart. An EEG is an electroencephalogram, so it monitors the electrical activity of the brain. We have one for the muscles as well. So that's measuring electrical fields. And when you have movement of electrons, you have a magnetic field. A magnetic field, you have electromagnetism. That by definition is energy.
Yep.
But it is completely overlooked and left out of the modern medical model, and ridiculed, yet used by the same people that ridicule the fact that there is an energetic component to our bodies.
Yep.
Right. And I was completely, I'll say I was completely guilty of that, because when I started to look at things from that standpoint, I would shake my head and go like, how could I have missed that? But again, it's sleep deprivation. You're loaded with junk food. You're loaded with toxins. You can't think properly. You have no time. That's what it is.
Yep.
And so anyways, I went to this week-long retreat and had this mind-blowing experience with a gentleman that was there. He had, anyways, I can go through the story quickly if you want, but what it did was it really solidified my understanding and belief, I would say, in the bigger picture, the higher powers, the energy, and the impact that energy has on the physical expression of our body, and that it actually all starts with the energy. And the physical manifestation of absolutely everything in the body is the last step.
I completely agree with you. I love Joe Dispenza's work. I love his work. I've got all of his books down there. Like I've read them all. I haven't had the privilege of going to one of his events yet. I do plan on going. I know there's one in Cancun in Mexico very soon, but I don't know if I'm going to get to go to that one. But I'd love to go. So anybody that has been, you pull me in straight away. I'm like, I want to know more. I want to know more. Tell me more. Yeah,
and I think he does go to the UK quite a bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, he used to, at least before 2020. He used to do a lot of events in the UK.
I'll have to check that out then. I think I'm part of his Telegram group. I'll have to check that out, see when the next UK one is.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about this moment within that event which just switched you.
So I've always had this, I think, well, everybody has the ability to tap into their intuition. We've just been told we don't have it. We've just been told to override it with our thinking brain, and that it's not really something you should listen to, but it's real. It's a real thing. And so I've always known it was there, but I have not put the emphasis on listening to it. So I met really the first day after the first meditation. It was in Portland, Oregon. So there's a river there. And anytime I can be outside, because I think, again, we naturally gravitate to being outside because that's where our cells get the signals that feel so good. So I went outside to go walking by the river on our break, and I met one of the fellows who was also at the retreat. We started talking, and we just walked for about an hour, and we were just talking and kind of getting to know each other. And he was there. So at the time he was 42, and he had a cancer that, he was told was rare. There were no protocols for it. So he was, in a sense, a guinea pig, and they were doing a bunch of experimenting with him. And I don't pry into people's business. I let people share what they want. And so I didn't ask any deeper. As the conversation, went on, he found out that I was a medical doctor, and he just was explaining that the cancer was neurological in origin, and he was telling me where he thought it originated from in terms of the trauma that had taken place when he was a child. So that was all that I knew. We got back to the event, and there was the bigger group is split up into smaller groups. His group went off to do this activity, and the rest of the groups went on to do another meditation. And so in the meditation, about 20 minutes in, I would say, I started to get this squeezing in my back, in my vertebrae. And listening to Joe Dispenza, he often says things will come up in the body that, that energy, when energy is moving, and to try not to be alarmed by it, because then it will take you out of that state, the meditative state, and just try to relax into it and allow the energy to move through your body. So that's what was going through my mind as this came up. But I was thinking to myself, I've never had any major accidents. I hadn't hurt myself there. I didn't have any, I didn't recall any problems. And it just out of the blue popped into my mind. I wonder if that is where this man's cancer is. I have no idea why that thought entered my head, but I think especially when you go to one of his retreats, but I think you can appreciate that a lot of people think that this stuff is crazy, yep. Right? And so I was somewhat feeling like I was believing this stuff, but coming to this event, I'm like, so many people thought I was completely nuts. And even my sister said that it was a scam. It was all just a money grab. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm at this place. Why don't I just surrender to what I'm being told? Like, why not just experiment with this? And so I was really feeling like I'm just going to allow this to move through me. And if this is where his cancer is, I'm just going to hold him in my heart, send him loving energy, and just allow this to pass. So the feeling actually stayed for most of the meditation until we finished. And then we had exchanged numbers. I texted him and I said, hey, come find me when you get back. I have something to talk with you about. I just wanted to ask him, right? Obviously I was curious. And he said, we're just on the bus on the way back. Just, what is it? And I said, well, I think it's probably better in person. And then he said, just let me know. Just tell me. So I texted him a short message, and I said, what I explained to you, that's what I explained to him. He didn't message me back. He came to find me in the room, and he came to me and he said, Rachel, he said, when I read your message, he said, I was tears. He said, because I just 2 weeks ago had radiation from my C4 to my T2. And he said, I have been in pain. He's been in incessant pain in that particular area. And so first of all, just the first, part of it, the fact that that is the area where he had the tumor. The next morning, he said he woke up and all of his pain had disappeared.
Wow.
So I know some people listening might say, oh, well, that's coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence
I don't either
anymore.
No.
So
I think the fascinating part of that is you were the conduit of it. So I'm very woo-woo. I'm very woo-woo. So I have no difficulty believing this. It's just when you are the person who's moved it for him, like you've been the key. That's incredible. I mean, it just goes to show that we are all one energy.
Right.
He was probably not in a energetic space where he was able to release it himself. And so God, source, great spirit, whatever word you want to use, used you as the vessel to move that forward for him. That's amazing. I mean, that is one of the best versions of being somebody's candle in their moment of darkness, right? Like you can't get any better than that. Like you were able to allow him to transition to the next stage of his healing by allowing it to transition through you, because you were obviously in a healthier state physically, but also, I guess, energetically to him.
Right.
The synchronicity of all of that meeting is incredible.
I know.
Incredible. Wow. So how did, after he told you the next day his pain went, what were you thinking at that moment?
I was dumbfounded.
Yeah.
Because I still, like, it wasn't me, like you were just describing, right? Yeah. Like it is, we are all connected. And I think of it, like you said, now understanding more about fascia, which is, again, ironically, really not explored at all in medical school, but fascia weaves every single aspect of our body together, including within the cells. Mm-hmm. So that's how that's sort of more on a microcosmic level. But when we think about how we are all connected, that is the same. You can almost imagine this web, right? Yep. We are all connected via this web. And I mean, I was surprised. I was shocked. I was starting to feel like I was being shown that this is the path that I'm supposed to take. Yeah. That's really what it nudged me to do, I think, because I had thoughts of that in my head, but didn't quite have the belief solidified. And I think that's really what that did for me. And it took me on a whole new path, right? I couldn't consume books fast enough. I became voracious at reading all about this and listening to whatever I could. And I obviously had a desire to read and learn because I'd gone through all of that schooling, right? But when you're, in a sense, forced to learn things, you lose that passion, you lose that joy in doing it just for yourself. Yeah. And this really brought that back. And I was reading, I mean, my parents used to joke about the fact that I was not a reader when I was growing up. I was not a reader. I didn't like reading nonfiction, or I didn't like reading fiction. I was always interested in learning things, which, people used to say that I was just boring, but that's just the way I was. And I wasn't going to change that for anybody. So, I would read like 2 to 3 books a week. And I don't know how I was reading that quickly, but I had in my mind, somehow I wanted to transition to step outside of the work that I was doing as an anesthesiologist, because I started to feel like I was out of alignment. Yeah. And I wasn't really helping people the way I could, and the way people could actually heal, right? I understand a lot more fully now just how much of this modern medical model has to do with keeping us sick, not even just managing disease, but it's really at best only meant to delay the progression.
Yep. Well, there's no profit in cure, is there?
Right. No.
Right.
There's none.
There is no profit in that. But I think your story encapsulates something which again, whether you want to call it universal, great spirit, or source energy, has just been browbeating me with for the past month, which is, and this ultimately sums up the law of manifestation, the law of attraction. People will say you have to believe it to see it, or I have to see it to believe it. And I think both of those are slightly incorrect. I think it's more that you have to feel it to believe it. And then once you believe it, you'll see it. And so you felt it. That's what makes it so tangible. That's what makes it so real, is the fact that the energy within you, the spark, the fascia, like everything which allows you to feel something. Because, how do we feel emotion, right? It's that kind of thing.
Right.
You felt it,
which
then sparked that belief in it. And then that belief in it then transpired into the physical manifestation of him resulting in no pain in that area. So it just encapsulates that whole manifestation piece. And I hope people can understand this. You have to feel the thing before you can believe the thing. And as much as a lot of people don't like Andrew Tate, one of the things he was speaking about when it comes to this same thing is, in his martial art practice, you've got something called a low kick, which is not really that big of a deal until you get hit with a really hard low kick. So his coach always used to say to him, never think that a low kick isn't valuable, because it is. And he would kind of push it to one side, but yeah, whatever. It's all about the big kicks and the big hits. So his coach would beat him with a low kick. And it was only once the low kick came in that Tate realized, holy crap, a low kick's actually really powerful because I can feel it. And now that I feel it, I believe that it's a valuable tool to have in my arsenal. So it's that same thing. Right. You have to feel it. And I think that just encapsulates it all perfectly, that experience. Sorry, I've derailed the conversation completely, but I think it's very important because, again, I'm very much into the quantum as much as I am into the woo spiritual manifestational kind of stuff. And this is what Source Spirit has been telling me for the last month in my meditations is feel it. And I've not been resistant to it, but there's been that part of me that surely I have to believe it first. Surely I have to believe that thing exists before I can then feel that thing. And it's totally not that way around. It is feel it, then believe it, to then see it. So thank you again for that message being brought back in for me for that one more time, just to solidify that point. So
see, once again, there's no coincidences, right? For me bringing the story up.
No, not at all. Not at all. Everything is synchronistically planned. Everything is. And you've got to think, we were supposed to have this call a week ago. So if we'd had this call a week ago, we might not have had this exact conversation, which means I would not have got that little piece of information. And maybe people that are listening would not have got that information. And so they would now not have that full understanding of feel, believe, to see. Right. Incredible. So 2017, 2018, so Joe Dispenza, and then 2020, I believe you said, was the next point where you had that change. So
yes,
let's fast forward to 2020. What happened?
Okay. So just going there. So 2018 to 2020, I was feeling like I really want to get out of the system. I don't know how. It's very comfortable financially. I know what I'm doing like the back of my hand. So how do I step into the unknown, step into that place where I have to give up the security. And that's when I feel, again, no coincidences. 2020 happened, and that the universe gave me that message. This is your chance to do it. Or I guess it's 2021. 2020 was more the revelation of what was a deeper understanding of the system that I was working in.
Sure.
So 2020 happened, and I have to say at the very beginning, I was terrified, because as an anesthesiologist, you are in people's faces every single case that you do. You have to put a breathing tube down, so you have to get right close to their face, and hearing that this is initially, whatever we want to call it now, but at the time, I believed that this was a deadly virus, right? That I could then contract and even take home to my family. So, but at the same time, I understood this is what I was trained to do. You know, this was my area of expertise, and I had a duty to help humanity. Mm-hmm. So that's where my thinking was at the beginning. You know, we used all the stuff, the shields, we had literally like things that looked like a hazmat suit on. There were all sorts of crazy things that were out there.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of COVID in our hospital. And my hospital, although I'm in a smaller town, it's the second largest and busiest trauma center in our province. Mm-hmm. So it's not small because we're on a highway. Like, it's not like we are too small to actually have the caseload that there would be a lot of cases. We just didn't have anything coming through. And that puzzled me. And I thought, oh, maybe we're just lucky. Honestly, that's what went through my head. We're just lucky because I'm hearing about these things. Obviously, we're hearing about it all over the place. And then I started phoning. When we do medical school, we're all together. We do residency, we're all spread apart. And then when we do residency, we all go our separate ways. So I have a lot of people that I know in different parts of North America, all across Canada. Yeah. So I started phoning, you know, people that I had done residency with and medical school with in different parts of Canada. I'm like, hey, what's your hospital like? Like, are you busy? What's going on? And what we saw on social media was, you know, people having the time to make TikTok dances. Halls of the hospitals were empty.
Yep.
For us, our operating room, our hospital would never, ever, ever function, or we never had it under 100% capacity. It was always running at 120, 130, meaning we never had enough beds. People were in the halls, people in the kitchen, people were and literally our hospital was able to get to 80% capacity. I've never seen that in the 17 years that I've been here. I've never seen it get to 80% capacity. And then I started, because we all had time, because we weren't doing anything, right? We canceled all the elective cases. And there was nothing going on. I started doing some digging, and that's when things just started to didn't make sense to me beforehand as well. This whole business of the masks. I mean, I was taught in my entire residency, it was hammered home. We had journal clubs over and over and over again. For 15 years, I rarely wore a mask in the operating room because I felt suffocated after I got pregnant. And the research showed that there was no increased risk of infection for anyone in the operating room, unless you were standing around the sterile field, and it didn't have to do with infection. It had to do with any big particulate matter. Or, you know, there were medical students, I hate to say this, people listening, that they would vomit or pass out and, you know, go forward. So that's what the mask was meant for. And then suddenly all of my colleagues are going on and on about masks. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. Like, we haven't been doing this forever. And suddenly you're thinking that the mask, and then 2 masks and 3 masks, and then make your own mask. And I'm like, wait, this is kind of crazy. Like, this is not normal. Yeah. And again, like the PCR test, everyone talks about follow the experts, right? That's part of the problem, is we outsource everything to who we call experts, which I have my own philosophy or belief about now, right? I can say this, and I can say it without fear of people kind of coming at me, because I was fully indoctrinated. So I think the more education you have, the more indoctrinated you become. And I was there. I have no problem saying I was fully indoctrinated. So the whole business of PCR, I thought, well, everyone says follow the experts. So I go back to looking at the source of who created this PCR test. And he says, it was Kerry Mullis, you cannot diagnose any type of pathogen disease. You can't say whether someone has it or not. But so to me, after listening to that, I thought, well, how can we're basing everything on this test? And then I asked questions in the OR, and that's when everything started to go south, because I was told to shut up, don't talk about this. I was hauled into our chief of staff's office. You're scaring staff in the operating room. I was just asking questions, and I was just getting them to think for themselves.
Oh, you don't want to get people thinking.
Right.
Can't do
that. Then that's when I started, I will say, going down rabbit holes and learning from people that I thought had, if we're looking to experts, high degrees, high qualifications, expertise in the area of quote unquote virology, whatever that, if we want to call it that now, and people saying different things. So what I thought we were taught in medicine was to look at all the angles and question. And again, I don't want to harp too much on that, but that really start to make me question everything, and led me down a whole bunch of different avenues from different people. And one of the people, and I want to bring this up because it's really, really important in my opinion for me, and where I've changed my philosophy about things is prior to 2020, I will say I fully believed in vaccines. And I say that laughing because I'm like, I can't believe that I did. I'm horrified now at all of the shots that I've given my kids over the years. Because if I were to start from now, I would not give my kids, and if I had children now, I would not give them one single shot.
Yep.
You couldn't convince me otherwise after everything I have learned. And this is coming from my undergrad. I did a microbiology and immunology degree in my undergraduate.
Okay.
So I have more of an understanding of immunology and virology and cellular biology than the average medical doctor, unless they went into that specialty.
Sure.
So I started listening to, I'm sure you would know Andrew Wakefield.
Yep.
So again, we were taught to dismiss him, mock him. Everyone, criticized him. And I started listening to him out of curiosity. And the man is absolutely brilliant and has the most genuine heart. And when you listen to him speak, everything he says makes sense. And it was clear that he was just thrown under the bus and he was the one to be made an example of. And that's really what started my path down revisiting vaccines. And now my understanding about what they are for is completely different. And like I said, I would not give my children any, but in that research, because it was still 2020 and there was talk of, maybe there's going to be a vaccine. In my head, I was thinking, we've got another 5-10 years. Like that's not going to happen. Right. So I don't even have to worry about anything yet, knowing that it was experimental, which if you can believe it, much of the staff that I worked with in the hospital a year, 2 years after still didn't know that it was experimental, even though it was very public that it was experimental.
Wow.
So this is, and these are the people giving and imparting the medical information and advice to the public.
Yep.
So I was thinking this was going to be a long time, and then surely it showed up like the next day. And I thought to myself, well, no, something's wrong here, because they were making promises about safety and efficacy, which were actually, it was impossible. It was absolutely impossible to make that claim. You need time in order to make a claim like that. And there had been no time. So it was in my mind, it was an impossibility. And so I was not about to experiment on myself, because for me, my children have always been my top priority. And at that point in time, it had been rolling out in other places, just hadn't come here yet. And, I think there's the public knowledge, or everyone knows about the first lady that was given the shot publicly and passed out, or fainted, or actually died right away on camera. And all I was thinking about was my kids need their mom around and, physically to be here and not injured. So I was going to, if it would come to mandates, which it ended up doing, I was going to walk away. Not thinking it would be for a long time, because I think worldwide in the Western system, the healthcare practice and the entire model and everyone, it's in crisis. There's a lack of staff everywhere. And so I didn't think it would be for a long time. So I wasn't concerned at the time. But walking away at that time, I was going to share something, which I'll go back to, but what it really did was it allowed me to take the time outside of the environment that I had been in so that I had the space to breathe, the
Mm-hmm.
time to reconnect, get sleep, make sure that I was in a clean, get fresh air, get the light. And so it really allowed me to take that, to take the time and give me the signals and the clarity to start using my mind and critically think.
Yep.
And that was the big change for me. And that's what made me realize, I mean, it's taken time, and there was a road, that I went down, but that's really how I've come to understand what we are living in, and our environment is exactly what will give us our life, right? It's what we create. We think that life happens to us. We think that everything is happenstance, right? We just allow reality to unfold the way we think it's supposed to unfold. And we don't realize that we have such power to actually create the life we want.
Yep.
And not just, whether it be finances or what, but our health and how we want to spend our days. I was tied to that, well, I want to say like 9 to 5 job. It wasn't 9 to 5, but you know what I mean? That time cycle. Whereas when you step out of that, I didn't realize I could actually create a life that I wanted, that I didn't have to be tied to working for someone else. And it was working for the government, working for the system, that kind of thing. But I could actually plan my life and live in a way that was conducive to my health, right? I didn't realize how unhealthy I was living.
Yep.
And so I know I'm kind of being cognizant about time here as well, but
it's quite all right.
What's that?
It's quite all right.
Okay. I came across, because I wanted to make sure that I mention this person, because he has been so instrumental in getting me to where I'm at right now as well, is Jason Christoff. And so for anyone who's not familiar with him, I don't know if you are, but he's a Canadian. Mm-hmm. And I heard him probably in 2021 speak on a couple of different podcasts. And he was a straight shooter, did not mince words, spoke with clarity and discernment about exactly what was going on in the world, and how we were all being bamboozled by what was going on. And I think I also really liked the fact that he was so direct, because I had mentioned earlier that I grew up, my father was a psychiatrist, and growing up in a household with a psychiatrist, and I can't generalize, but growing up with him as a psychiatrist, most of what took place was never direct. There was always talking in circles and trying to get things pulled out of you. And I had to guess what was being meant by something. Like, it was really, so I became someone that was very direct, because I didn't want misunderstanding, miscommunication. And sometimes my family uses other words to describe my bluntness, but I like understanding the information directly. I don't want to be confused by it. And
exactly, get to the point kind of thing.
Yeah. So Jason Christoff is incredible, and he really showed me from another angle. Like, I had learned about the subconscious mind and programming from, again, Joe Dispenza and that whole community, like Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, Greg Braden. There's a whole community there who talks about how the subconscious mind works. And after 2020, learning about the subconscious mind, which is really what I was learning from Jason Christoff, there's a whole, preamble. He explains how he got to this point, but it was a very different take on it. And my understanding grew of how easily we are programmed as human beings, how easily we are brainwashed, how easily we are manipulated. And that was going on in our environment, from our media to the news, right? The news is all bought and paid for, so they show us what we want. But our entertainment industry, what we hear, the music, the films, like, we're taught to idolize or maybe not taught, but it's like this herd mentality idolizes stars, whether they are in sports or music or actors. And then they are the puppets to basically condition us to want to behave how this ruling group that is really pulling the strings on everything going on in the world to behave. And I say this, speaking about being blunt, like we are ants on an ant farm. We are cattle being herded and led around and not cared about, which is why we are getting bombarded by toxins and poisons at all angles. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? If you don't really notice that one tiny little cut, then you won't question it. And if you're ingesting all these toxins and being surrounded by artificial light, which is also a toxin, the non-native EMFs, we're disconnected from the earth, we're not going to be thinking that we're being poisoned, right? That it's going to really affect us. It's not really affecting us on a noticeable level, except that we express symptoms, but we're taught that those are diseases.
Yeah. And that is normal.
Right. And that is exactly.
Yeah. And that is normal. And I guess the icing on the cake on that one is we're also told or taught or shown through movies and other things like that there's not much that we can do about it. We are powerless to make any effect on it. And it's like, well, no, we're not. Like even I was having this conversation with a client the other day because we're talking about our current prime minister here, and I'm not his biggest fan, if I'm brutally honest. And I said, like we can vote him out if there's enough of us in the UK that if we all put pen to paper, he'd have to leave. We can make the king advocate his throne if we want to. No, we can't. No, yes, we can. Like I said, you have to remember, like a government is employed by the people. That's what they're for. They're supposed to govern for the people. They're not supposed to control the people. They're supposed to do it for the people. Royalty, that was, we are in charge and you do as we say.
Right.
But you don't have that level of royalty anymore. Governments are there to work for the people. That's why we pay them with taxes and stuff like that. They're supposed to do what's best for us, not what's best for them and sod everybody else, which is what our government's doing all the time. He's taking money from the elderly and from students and raising taxes, and then he's giving 1.6 billion to the Ukraine.
Right.
Like, what are you doing? Like, there's problems here. Like, put that money to use here. Like, don't give it to a war that we're not part of, and see the bigger agenda here. Like, that's a whole World War III waiting to happen, and you're now funding it. Like, don't do that, because the more people that are involved, the quicker it's going to happen. Like, pull yourself out. But because he's a weft puppet at the end of the day, he is being told from above, you have to do these things.
Right.
And so
I think that you just hit the nail on the head. And I think you would really like listening to Jason Christoff.
I'm going to research when I finish this with you. So that's the first thing I thought. I was like, I'm researching this guy, because I think his name's Jason Christoff. The only guy that I know like that is that he's an author. And that's who I thought you were talking about. It's a guy called Chris. Is his name Jason Christoff? He wrote Empire with the Vampire and Nevernight and stuff like that. Great. Some of my favorite books. But anyway, digressing. So yeah, I need to go and research this guy.
Well,
100%.
so I've learned so much, and it's not that it's his opinions. He shares articles, he shares interviews, he shares a lot of things that are hidden. But he also shares, just so people can really understand the level of the level of the depth that we can be controlled. He'll share, and I don't know if you're familiar, I had not heard of any of these people, but there's a lot of I guess what people would call mentalists or hypnotists. And there's one called Darren Brown, I think, in the UK. Right.
Yep.
So there's a lot of films that he will show that these people have kind of created, where you can actually visibly watch just how easy it is to get into people's minds and get them to come out with things that you already know that they're going to. And then you guessing it, they're like, well, how did you know?
Yep.
And
Darren Brown's incredible at doing all that stuff.
So I don't know if you've seen it was on Netflix, I want to say, but they've pulled it. It's called The Push.
Okay.
So The Push is, I mean, again, Jason Christoff he describes it much better, but it is a film, and you can get it from being in his email list because you can't find it anywhere now. But this company asked Darren Brown to set up this kind of stage, this scenario, to just see how one could be, how someone could easily be manipulated into doing something that they thought they would never do.
Yep.
And so it's like, it was set up like there are 300 actors. So there's only one person who comes in that is being manipulated. Everyone else is an actor, a part in this play. But it only took 3 hours. It only took 3 hours to get, I think it was 3 out of 4 people, because they did this 4 times, 3 out of 4 people to push a man off a building to his death. It didn't happen because the guy was strapped in. They didn't know that he was, had a harness on. And so he went over the side of the building, and he obviously didn't die. He was safe. And that's when they went and would tell the person who had come in and was the participant what had taken place.
Whoa.
But yeah.
Okay. I need to see this. Wow.
Yeah. So, there's this idea of herd mentality and the subconscious mind. And most of us think that we live our life from the conscious mind. Although, I would challenge people to think they also know that they don't, because oftentimes we will do things and then we'll think like, why did we do that? Why did we say that? I didn't want to do that, or I wasn't going to say that next time. Or I really want to go to the gym, and then they don't go they sabotage themselves, or they sabotage themselves eating. They lose 10 pounds, then you gain 20 pounds back. And so there is this innate, right? There's an innate wisdom within us, but our subconscious programming is a survival mechanism, and it is there to allow us to survive. And how we use the subconscious programming, I think a lot of people may understand as well, is by repetition in our environment. Right? The repetition is how we then, like, for example, drive a car and still have a conversation, right? There's repetition. And so for our subconscious mind, repetition of anything in an environment goes to the top of the list, and we will subconsciously follow whatever the repetition is, whether it's thoughts, behaviors, or actions, without a second thought, because that is for our survival. So if our conscious mind is taken offline, our subconscious mind moves to the front, and it acts out of pure survival. And so our conscious mind is taken offline most of the time by all the toxins, by all of our negative thoughts, by, again, the lighting, the EMFs, and all that kind of stuff. So most of the time our subconscious mind is running the show. And that is why most of us follow the crowd. We follow the herd mentality, because that is by design, ancestrally, how we would survive. Like we are a pack animal. So if you had, a wolf that was injured, it's not going to linger on the perimeter of the pack. It's going to go bury itself in the middle of the pack. So it's got the protection from all the other wolves. And so that's what happens. We are injured by all of these poisons. And the best way for our survival is to then basically comply with what everyone else is doing. And these people know that, and that's what's taking place. But most people don't understand this. So that's why what I'm doing now, and we haven't even got onto the quantum biology part yet, but is helping people really get healthy, because that is how we can start to then feel the strength, get our brains back online to be able to think, see what's taking place, and step out, have the courage to step outside of the herd, right? We've seen what happens, just like crabs in a crab bucket. If like a crab's trying to get out, all the other crabs
pull them back in, don't they?
It's everyone, if you notice since 2020, that has been speaking something different from the constant refrain has been attacked, has been censored, has been ridiculed, has been, had lawsuits against them.
Yep.
Everything to try to make everyone else see that if you step outside, this is what's going to happen to you.
Yep.
And then people operate out of fear.
Yep.
Right? They behave and they don't speak, because even when I was in the hospital and I would say things to people, a lot of people would say, yeah, I know, but I can't say that. I can't do that. And I'm like, why not? And even, and I say this, and I don't mean this in any demeaning way or to downplay people's circumstances, but a lot of people come to me now after the fact and they will say, well, I didn't want to take the shot, but I had to because I had to keep my job. I had, I needed money for this and that. And I'm like, you're talking to the wrong person.
Yep.
Because I walked away from a lot of money into the unknown.
Yep.
Because that's what I believed in.
Yep.
So I do understand and have compassion, but at the same time, that answer doesn't necessarily work for me.
No, I think in those situations, because I was the same, you can, I have empathy, but there's no sympathy, because at the end of the day, it still comes down to choice. Everybody has a choice. Everybody had the same choice. I didn't get any vaccines. And I shouted from the rooftops to everybody, please don't do this. Something feels incredibly off. And you can't, same as you can't push a vaccine through this quickly. It needs to go through these types of trials. So either they've rushed it or it's planned. And if it's planned, that's a problem. If it's rushed, that's a problem.
Right.
Don't get them. And then my mum and my stepdad got it. My dad and my stepmom got it. My dad, after the second jab, got skin cancer literally 2 days after. Yeah. My mum, she had neuropathy. So she had all that burning going down her arms and everything. My stepdad had like golf ball sized lymph nodes at its side of his head and stuff. Like it was horrific. And I warned them. I said to them, don't. But obviously they felt fear like everybody else. And this is no disrespect to anybody that got it done out of fear.
Right.
Because fear is one thing.
Right.
But if you're doing it because of choice like that, like you're talking about, that's very different. You don't have to do that. You can always get a different job. But at the same time, nobody knew what was going on at that point. So,
right.
Again, empathize with everybody in that position, because, you can only do what you can do. Like you don't know what you don't know. And so you can only make the decisions with the information that you're given.
Right.
And if the only information that you're given is what you're seeing on mainstream, then of course you're going to feel like you're being pushed into this decision, which is what they wanted in the first place. But so how did you then, and again, I want to be very, very mindful of your time, and I'm definitely going to get you back for a part 2 so we can delve into this a little bit deeper. How do you then get into the quantum? What was that switch for you?
Yeah. So I was starting to realize that I didn't think I was going to be going back to work, because for some reason, in the province that I live in British Columbia in Canada, we held on to the mandates for 3 years. So apparently the science is different here. Yeah.
That's just where you are.
Yeah, exactly. And so the more time went on, I was thinking, oh, I'm really not going back. Because I thought after, there would be a dumpster fire in our system that they would just start asking everybody back, which they did in other parts of the world, in other parts of Canada, even like the next province over in Alberta. I think it was only 4 months and they started asking people back to work that had not received the shots, but they weren't here. And I started thinking, well, I guess I better start looking at some other ways of making some money. And I started doing a lot of courses, and in all of the research, because I was reading a lot, listening to a lot, there was just so much, right? I feel like more than a lifetime's worth to learn. That's when I came across actually Dr. Jack Kruse.
Same.
And it was one of Jason Christoph's emails that he put out, that he had a link of Dr. Jack Kruse talking about fluoride. And because he was a dentist and then an oral surgeon and then did neurosurgery. So for anyone who doesn't know that's listening, he's a neurosurgeon out of the US. He started talking about things that again, caught my attention. I was not taught in medical school. And so that's when I just started diving into listening to everything that I could on YouTube from him. And honestly, my jaw was on the ground. Yep. And at the time, it was also very timely because when I had left work, so that I left in the fall of 2021, ironically, that's when my sleep started becoming disrupted. And I think it was probably more from stress, I would say, because it doesn't really make sense any other reasons, although there are other reasons that now I'm contradicting myself, but I think it was stress at the time, or I thought it was stress. I had significant fatigue during the day to the point where I couldn't keep my eyes open while driving, and my kids were in high level sports that we'd have to drive to different cities. So spending like 2 to 4 hours a day driving, and it was really bad. And so then I had stopped caffeine, but I had to resume because I had to make sure that I was awake while driving.
Of course. And
I wasn't getting much sleep at night. And I was like, what on earth is going on? And I had tried a bunch of different things, keto diet, intermittent fasting, like a lot of things that I'd heard about that would help with energy. But then listening to Jack Kruse, I was like, well, okay, this light thing, I'm going to try it out. So I bought some blue blockers. So I blocked artificial light at night, and I was getting up with sunrise. And I'm not joking, within 2 to 3 weeks, I had zero fatigue during the day.
Yep.
It was that I know some people it even happens faster, but it was that fast. And I was stunned. Like such simple, like really simple lifestyle changes can have that much of an impact.
Yep.
It was fascinating. So of course I started digging even deeper, and, I know that he's a different, he's a different cat. He's very typical of people that I was used to working with, in terms of, he's a very typical surgeon in terms of his bedside manner. And it's interesting because he says that how he's humbled, right? He's humbled now. And he says, imagine what I was like before. I can't imagine that. But I started coming across a lot of other people who were sharing the same type of information, namely the Quantum Biology Collective, because I had heard Meredith Oak from there interviewing him. And so then I started looking into what she had put together, and I ended up going through their program because I just liked the structure. There was structure. There was a foundation which was built upon. So they were laying the ability to understand and build your understanding, not just kind of pulling things from all different angles and a whole bunch of different scientific words that, were a lot of stuff was going way over my head as well when I was trying to read Jack Kruse's blogs. But learning from them, I actually eventually just recently in December became board certified in quantum biology. So that's
congratulations.
Thank you. It's a recent certification that they connected with the American Naturopathic Medical Certification Board to create this board exam. So it's a legitimate, quote unquote, board certification. So people, when you speak about it, know that it's not this woo-woo, intangible kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, I started learning from Carrie Bennett. Some of the stuff even Sarah Kleiner was getting into, because she interviewed Jack Kruse quite a bit. And now Dr. Alexis Cowan, Dr. Sarah Pugh, like just so many people, right, that we met as well, but when we met in person. Yep. And it's really changed my entire understanding of how the human body works. That was really the biggest thing for me. It really allowed me to, it took the foundation right out from under me, right? Everything that I was taught. And again, not that things were a lie. There were lies that I was taught, but not that everything about the body was a lie, but it was very incomplete. And it was looked at from an angle, and the way that we implement treatments for people in the modern medical world ignore everything about quantum biology, and they ignore everything about energy, and the environment that is so much more impactful, and not even just impactful, but allows for true healing, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that's done in the modern medical model right now is not conducive to healing.
No.
And I have to just bring this up as well, because just for people that are listening, doctors are taught that they are the ones that help people with healing, mm-hmm. not that the body actually heals itself.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. And I say that again, coming from being in that place for 30 years, because I was in that medical system for 30 years between my education and work experience. Stepping outside now, I remember the first time I actually heard that was from Joe Dispenza, when he was talking about his initial injury and how he ended up where he is now. Saying in his chiropractic teachings, he would remind himself of the power that made the body heals the body. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, wait, what? I was not taught that, right? I was not taught that. So again, there's a disconnect. Like I was talking about the ECG, and there's energy in the body, but the people who use the ECGs dismiss the energy. Yep. It's the same thing like when you get a cut and you put a Band-Aid on, or you break a bone and the orthopedic surgeon puts the bone back together using plates or just a cast. So it's a pose. The bone is regenerating. The surgeon didn't heal the bone, right?
No.
But people who work within kind of don't realize that. They don't think about that. And I think that's where a lot of, and again, I say this because I was there, but I worked with a lot of people who had huge egos. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think surgeons are among when it comes to the hierarchy at the top of the list with egos, just because of the nature of what they do, or who's drawn into that type of specialty. But I was confronted with that quite a bit. And so there is that God complex. Mm-hmm. It is a real thing. It's not, I'm not going to say that everybody has it. I'm not blanketing everybody that works in medicine or in the healthcare system like that. But it is really something that is pervasive, even mm-hmm. if it's just a low level or undertone of it. Mm-hmm. So a big shift for me was really understanding that all we need to do is give the body the correct information, and it will do the healing, and it will do what it is designed to do. And that is really the basis and the foundation of quantum biology and how I'm helping people now.
Amazing. So if you could give people one or two little tips to get them involved into quantum, what would you suggest would be their starting point?
What I would say, light is really at the top of the list to changing our light environment. And the simplest way, because really the best thing to do would be to get sunrise light, right? That would be at the top of my list. However, there are so many people that just do not get up at sunrise.
Yep.
They just won't. It doesn't matter what you do, what you tell them, how much you tell them it's beneficial for them. For me, the easiest and the simplest way to get people to shift that is to buy a pair of blue blockers, just like what you've got on, because you can fight it all you want, but your cortisol, if you put evening, and I say evening blue blockers to start with, because of being mindful of people's finances as well. But at sunset, putting on the evening blue blocking glasses, just naturally, your cortisol will start to decline, your melatonin will start to increase, and you will become tired. You can fight it all you want, but you will become tired, because that is the signal your body's getting. And then that will allow the shift in your sleeping habits to change.
Yep.
To instead of staying up till 2 a.m, you will just be, I'm tired now by 7:30 at night.
Yeah. I'm the same. Like these orange ones, I wouldn't normally still be wearing right now. These would normally be red by now because it's way past sunset here. But obviously, I can't put the red ones on while I'm talking on a podcast because I will be just nodding off because it's just, again, it's that signal. And I think it was a couple of days ago, I was reading an article where they did a study where they said that it's something like 90% of the light that is around us is absorbed through the eyes, and the rest of it is through the skin.
Right.
And so through the non-visual photoreceptors and stuff. So if you are going to block light, the best thing to start with and the main focal point is through your eyes. Yeah. So making sure you've got the glasses. So like you, I say to all clients, first thing, get some red glasses. Put them on 2 hours before you go to bed. And I guarantee you an hour after wearing them, you are going to be drifting and you are going to be wanting to go to bed because, again, you're getting those right signals. Even if you've got the TV on, you'll find yourself just nodding off to it because even though the lux, the brightness of the TVs are so much, but because you're covering your eyes, you're getting that signal and you will start drifting. There's nothing, nothing you can do. So around about 8:30, 8:45, that's when I start feeling it. And I'm like, right, I'm going to go and do a little bit of meditation. I'm then going to go into my room. I'm going to read my book. And literally by 9:15, I am gone. Absolutely gone. But by doing that, circadian rhythm has shifted. I now wake up at like 5:30 every morning. No alarm, no nothing. Sunrise here right now isn't until like 20 to 7. So it's still quite late, but I am up at 5:30 and I'm walking around with red lights on and stuff like that, just getting on with my day because I've just got used to it. So I think that's a very valuable tip for everybody. And you don't have to spend a fortune. What are those red light glasses? The Spectra somethings. I can't remember what they're called.
I think it's 7.6 or 4.7. Now I can't remember. Yeah, there's 3 numbers. It's
Spectra 4.7 or 4.750 or something like that. You can get them on Amazon. They're like $30.
Right, exactly.
They'd be the ones that I'd recommend. 100%. Yeah. Definitely. It's a great tip. And anything else you want to add to that?
Well, what I would say is because most of us spend the majority of our time indoors, I would say, to get as much outdoor time as possible. But if we're indoors, at least have windows open or a door, even just a crack, or add some extra red or infrared lights in the house because the modern windows block most of that red and infrared. And so we're deficient. And that is the healing that allows us to actually create the subcellular melatonin that helps us do some cleaning up during the day. So I think that is a really powerful tip to give people, because again, it's not taking anything out of your day. It's not taking any time out of your day, right? It's not, in a sense, forcing you to make a big lifestyle shift just to have, like, I've got a red light panel. I just do this. I've got windows and doors open. It's not energy efficient, right? But from the outside standpoint, but I like how Dr. Alexis Cowan says, we've created energy efficiency in our environment, but that creates an energy crisis in our body. So
amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So helping bring some of that red light, the red and infrared, back in, at least inside while you're working, because everyone, most people are working in front of computers and technology nowadays. So
yeah, exactly. And that's a very good tip to have. So a $30 pair of blue light blocking glasses and open a window, or a door, which is free. Right. You can't get better tips than that to start your quantum journey, really. Yeah. And there will be people saying, "Oh, what's opening a window or a door going to do?" But we have to remember that light can also act as a wave, not just as a photon. So it can actually pour through even the smallest of cracks. Right. So it's important that you open that window for the exact reason that you stated, is that modern windows block that spectrum. Right. So open the window, and people go, "Oh, but it's cold." Put a jumper on. Open that window. I've got all my windows open right now, and it's, as I say, it's like 20 to 8 in the evening here, so it's not exactly, and it's March. It's not exactly warm. Yeah. Put something warm on. Yeah. Open the windows, let the fresh air come through, let the light come through. It's absolutely fine. You get used to it. You get adapted. That's the thing. I think we live at like an ambient 70 degrees all the time, and people just get cold. Like, people, when I'm walking outside now, I'm in like a linen shirt, and people are looking at me like, "Why is he in a linen shirt? It's like -2." It's like, I don't feel it. I feel it. I'm very aware it's cold, but I'm not cold because I've just become cold adapted.
Yes.
So I think that there's some incredible tips, and I do think we're gonna have to bring you back on for part 2, because I'd love to continue this journey that you've been on, because there's so many things, particularly from your bio and the conversations that we've had, that I'd love to touch upon. So, and I just want to be very, very, very mindful of your time. So before we wrap this up, where can people find you? How do they get in touch with you? The floor is yours.
So I have a website. It's simple. It's my name, rachelmauricemd.com. And I'm on Instagram. So that's Rachel_Maurice_MD. And I'm also on Facebook, just Rachel Maurice. I'm not sure if it even says it, but my tagline is the unconventional MD.
Love it.
And my email is rachel@rachelmauricemd.com.
Perfect. I'll put those in the show notes as well, so that everybody has all of that. And do you have any closing thoughts for anybody, or a quote or anything which comes to mind before we wrap this up?
Well, what's been coming up for me lately with, in particular, someone that I'm helping right now, is I've been trying to emphasize that we cannot get well in the same environment that we got sick.
Amen to that. That's a beautiful way to end it. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, you can't get healthy in the environment that makes you sick. And on that note, please leave your comments, like, share, subscribe. We'll definitely be getting Rachel back for part 2. Rachel, thank you so much for your time, my darling. I really do appreciate it. This has been amazing. And I can't wait to the next one. And until then, have a beautiful day where you are, my darling. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed. Speak to you soon. My pleasure.